Hi again. I want to talk to you today about Gog and Magog in the Bible. I've seen a lot of presentations about Ezekiel chapter 38 and how that is supposedly pertaining to this time period we're in right now. Well, it isn't. The Bible says it is not about this time period we're living in now, and I'm going to prove it. In Ezekiel chapter 38, starting at verse 1, it says, "The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Prophesy against him, and say, This is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Also Gomer with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north with all its troops, the many nations with you. Get ready, be prepared, you all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years, you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people are gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out of the nations, and now all of them live in safety." So here we see that this is after Israel has been regathered, after 1948 and after 1967. This is after the Israelites have been gathered back to their nation. They were gathered from the many nations they were scattered to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. And it says here, they had been, past tense, they had been brought out from the nations, so that it had already happened that they had been brought out from the nations. And now all of them live in safety. Well, that does not apply to present-day Israel. Present-day Israel gets constant bombings from Palestinians and from the Muslims that oppose Israel, which is why they have their missile defense system, their dome, that protects Israel, because they need it, because they're under constant attack from the Palestinians who hate Israel. So this is not talking about today's Israel. It says now all of them live in safety. No, they don't. Not right now, they don't. So now has to be a different time period than right now. You and all your troops and the many nations, you will go up, advancing like a storm, and you will be like a cloud covering the land. He's talking about Magog, Gog and Magog. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a land of unwalled villages. Well, that's the state Israel will be in during the millennium, but that is not the state they are in now. They'll be at peace during the millennium for 1,000 years while Jesus reigns from Jerusalem. But this is not true of them now, land of unwalled villages. I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people. Well, they're not at peace right now. They're getting attacked constantly by the Palestinians. All of them living without walls, without gates, and without bars. That's not true at all. There's actually a dome that Israel has, a missile defense system that's like a dome that protects them, protects their whole country from the attacks of the Palestinians that are constant. So they do not live without walls. This is not talking about present-day Israel. Verse 12, I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. So this is what Gog and Magog are saying. They're going to plunder this land that is resettled, because it's been resettled for 1,000 years now during the millennium, and at the point of where this is being written. And it's resettled ruins, and the people are gathered from the nations. They've already been gathered from the nations. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all the villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hordes to loot, to carry off silver and gold, and to take away livestock and goods and seize much plunder? Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day when my people Israel are living in safety, now we know that's not talking about today's Israel. It's not talking about the Israel of right now. Will you not take notice of it? You will come from your place in the far north, and you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, O Gog, I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I show myself holy through you before their eyes. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Are you not the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel? At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen that day. When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment upon him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him and on his troops and on the many nations with him. Burning sulfur, okay? Hailstones and burning sulfur will be brought down on his troops and on the many nations gathered with him. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness. I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. The very just next chapter, verse 1. Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and will make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, and all your troops and the nations with you. I will give you as food to all the carrion birds and the wild animals. You will fall in the open fields, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am the Lord. I will send fire on Magog. So that's the second time. It said brimstone before. Now it says blatantly, I will send fire on Magog. In Revelation 19, we see that there's the great day of the Lord. In Revelation 19:11, it says, I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and makes war. And the armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses, dressed in fine linen, white and clean. And he treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh, he has the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So this is Jesus Christ. And on this day also, I saw an angel standing in the sun who cried with a loud voice to the birds in midair, come gather for the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, generals, mighty men, and horses, and their riders, and the flesh of all people, free and slave, small and great. This is not Gog and Magog. This is all people, free and slave, small and great. And then who are they? It says in verse 19, then I saw the beast and the kings of the earth, all the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against the rider on the horse and his army. But the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who had performed the miraculous signs on his behalf. And with those signs he had deluded those who received the mark of the beast and worshipped his image. This is obviously the day of the Lord. And the two of them were thrown alive into the fiery lake of burning sulfur. That's the Antichrist and the false prophet. The rest of them were killed with the sword that came out of the mouth of the rider on the horse, and the birds gorged themselves on their flesh. Well, and people say, well, Ezekiel 38 says that about Gog and Magog. The birds will gorge themselves on it. So that can happen more than once. Because we see in chapter 20 of Revelation, it says, and I saw an angel coming out of heaven, having the key to the abyss, and holding in his hand a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who's called the devil or Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. He threw him into the abyss and locked it and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be set free for a short time. And then in verse 7, we see that when the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison, and he will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. This is after the day of the Lord, after the millennium. This is when Satan goes out and deceives Gog and Magog and gathers them for battle. In number, they are like the sand of the seashore, just like it said in Ezekiel 38. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people. Where's Jesus reigning? In Jerusalem. The city he loves, that's Jerusalem. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the burning sulfur, the lake of burning sulfur. So here we see that Gog and Magog received their judgment after the millennium, after the 1,000 years. Gog and Magog, in number, they're like the sand of the seashore, just like it said in Ezekiel 38. They marched across the breadth of the earth, and fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And that is the judgment of Gog and Magog right there. That is what Ezekiel 38 is talking about. So as you can see, Gog and Magog get judged after the millennium, after the rapture, after the day of the Lord, after the millennium, 1,000 years after the day of the Lord. That's when Gog and Magog gather for battle against Israel, and they're gathered in peace and safety. Why is that? Because it's the millennium. Jesus is reigning from Jerusalem. So thanks for watching.